Good morning. My name is Isatu, and I'm the Deputy Head Girl as well as a passionate geographer here at Bonus Pastor Catholic College. I'd like to welcome you to our college this morning and to our air quality and climate change event, and thank you all for coming. Climate change is the most pressing issue of our generation. We are already seeing the impact of it upon our planet through the extreme weather experienced this year across the world. Flooding in Pakistan, which left over 1,700 people killed and thousands homeless and displaced. Increased hurricane intensity, particularly in the Caribbean and North America, with Canada experiencing its first ever tropical cyclone, Fiona, as these storms get stronger and hit areas never hit before. And here in the UK, where this summer we saw temperatures reach 40 degrees Celsius back in July, with wildfires breaking out across the country, and here in London, damaging 41 homes and injuring 16 firefighters. We are already feeling the effects of climate change and how we respond as a school, as a community, city, country, and collective world will not only shape our era and future generations, but will define it. Therefore, our voices as young people is one of the most important in this fight. This world is our common home, and we have a duty to help protect the future dignity of all of its citizens, particularly those who are most vulnerable, because we know that they will suffer the most unless we act now.
Thanks, Isatu. I can't follow that, but I'm glad I'm between Isatu and Sophia, and you guys can just drift off for a minute while I talk, because they're the ones you should be listening to, because they're the ones that are going to have to live through this, not me. So I really amplify what you just said there. My name's Dr. Mark Hayden. I'm lucky enough to be a paediatrician at Great Ormond Street Hospital. I've been there about 7 years or so. And for about 170 years, that hospital has been dedicated to finding new ways to treat, but also prevent childhood illnesses. I work in intensive care, which is where children go when they're seriously ill. And it's a privilege to work there and work with families and children when they face some pretty rough times. But the good news is most of the time they do absolutely fine and they have a really healthy life after that. But part of my role in intensive care sometimes is to tell families the truth about what's happening when it's bad news and when things are going wrong. And I've learned that the best solution is to be honest with them, even if I'm not sure, but to be honest with them about what's happening. And that's an important part of my role. So I want to be honest with you today. Most of you in the audience probably know this already, but there's plenty of scientific evidence. It's increasing rapidly, but it's been around for years, that air pollution at the levels we have in London causes a whole heap of illnesses. One's premature delivery, and that then leads to lots of other sequelae or problems with children with their lungs and brains. And we all know about asthma. It's both caused and exacerbated by pollution, particularly spikes in nitrogen oxides, which largely come from exhaust pipes. Explaining to families these impacts, and when there's so little they can actually do about it, is really hard for us as doctors. And we've struggled with that in the past, and some people in the audience know that we haven't done enough and we've failed. But just because you can't see something, just because it's invisible, and just because we feel powerless and we don't feel we can do anything about it, doesn't mean it's not a real problem. Just because you can't see something with the naked eye, it doesn't mean it's not dangerous. Take viruses. We've had some of them recently. You can see a virus with a good microscope, and in the same way you can see black carbon, which is a particle that you find in PM 2.5, in the brains and livers and lungs of unborn babies. You know, you can actually see it with a microscope if you look. And that's because the mothers have to breathe in the pollution, and the more pollution in the area where those mothers live, the more black carbon you can see. So we've got a very clear something we can see as to why children are being born prematurely and small. Some things like viruses are pretty easy to deal with, as we've all just worked out. All you need is a vaccine and masks, and pretty well they go away, or at least they reduce. But the solution to what we're talking about here today is clean air. And most of us can't afford to move to a mountain in Switzerland. And if we could, we wouldn't find a job there. Or I wouldn't find a job there anyway, because I'm a rubbish skier. So we have to bring the clean air to London, for what we're talking about here. We can't expect people to move. Most people can't afford to just move somewhere safe. Even if you're within London, there's discrepancies as to what the air is like. If you live or your school's near a busy road, you're going to have more exposure to pollution, and that is going to then cause more illness for you. So we need structural changes like school streets. I know we're not talking about school streets today, but school streets are where vehicles are banned for pick-up and drop-off time. And that both cleans up the air, but it also makes things feel safe to cycle and walk, and that makes a big difference and has lots of knock-on effects. I'm lucky enough, I live in Redbridge, and I live on a school street. It was introduced about a year ago, and I've seen and smelt the difference that it makes. The time I left this morning on my bike to come here as the school street was going on, and it was just great. There was loads of other people dropping off their kids on bikes, and I didn't feel worried until I obviously left the school street, and then I did. But I'm used to riding in London, so that's okay. So now they're happy, joyful times, whereas they used to be a hostile environment. So things that we do can make changes. I'm a doctor, not a traffic engineer. There's probably some traffic engineers in the audience. So I don't know the exact prescription for the problem, but I can see the evidence of the things that work, and I can see the changes with my own eyes, and in the case of the school street, with my nose. I also know that just banning things like cars doesn't work if you don't provide people with another solution. So those solutions need to be things like public transport, because even if that's not active travel, you have to walk there, and half the time, not that I ever use it because I'm always on my bike, but you have to walk between the places, so it's still activity. So it's still good for your health, and safe cycling and walking routes. As I said, I cycled here today, and it was a lot harder for me cycling here than to Great Ormond Street because there's a river in the way, and there's really no good cycle routes across that river. But I made it. I got on a ferry, and it worked fine. So if we want to reduce people just doing the easy thing and getting their car, we need to provide the alternatives for the walking and cycling. So I've nearly finished. As a children's hospital at Great Ormond Street, I think we have a responsibility to say that clean air is a child's right. We need to make changes rapidly to the way people move around London. Whatever the changes are, I'm not an expert, but I know things do need to change. But we need to do so in a just way that people can then not be left with no way to do what they need to do. And ideally, in fact, not ideally, it needs to be cheaper and easier to do the right thing than to do the wrong thing. And I think that's why we're in the situation we're in. So, cleaner air is a better future for our patients and all of London's children. Thank you very much. And I want to introduce the star, Sophia.
Good morning, my name is Sophia. My mum, Rosamond, is a WHO Breathe Life Ambassador for air quality and health, campaigning to improve air quality in London, in the UK and around the world. She founded the Ella Roberta Foundation, named after my sister Ella. Ella passed age 9 almost 10 years ago. She suffered a severe asthma attack, an attack that was brought on by traffic emissions from the nearby South Circular Road. She is the first person in the world to have air pollution listed as a cause of death on her death certificate. I would like to introduce Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London and a fellow asthma sufferer. The Mayor has been a big supporter of my family's campaign and shares our passion and determination to improve air quality for future generations. Thank you, Mr. Khan, for everything you're doing to help raise awareness of this silent pandemic and for the work you're doing in cleaning up the air we all breathe.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Dr. Mark Hayden. I'm glad you dressed up for today.
I'm sure you sounded in your seat.
That's the problem with smart doctors, eh? Mark, thank you so much for being here today. It really made a difference, you explaining the science but also talking to us about some of the patients you speak to every day and some of the families who will be grieving because of your inability to help them because of the toxicity in the made a big difference. And Isitu, thank you for a wonderful, wonderful speech. Listen, I've got to say, Jonathan, I had one request. Make sure the students who speak before me aren't very good, so I look good. Can we show appreciation to Isitu, please, for a great speech this morning as well? Look, thank you, Sophia, for that very kind and heartfelt introduction. I don't think we'll hear a more powerful testimony on the devastating effect of air pollution or why we need to act immediately. So thank you for sharing your family story. Please show appreciation and love to Sophia. Look, it's a privilege to be here, and I want to express my sincere gratitude to everyone who's joined us today, and say a special thank you to all the staff and students here at Bonus Pastor for the incredibly warm welcome. It's lovely to also be joined by the Assembly Member Sakina Sheikh, the local and brilliant Member of Parliament Janet Davey, and of course the best mayor in the room, I'm told, the Mayor of Lewisham, Damien Egan. Thank you for being here today as well. Sir Winston Churchill once said, "Healthy citizens are the greatest asset any country can have." Now, I'm well aware those words came from a man who often had whiskey and a cigar for breakfast. So maybe he didn't always practice what he preached. But he remains entirely correct. Healthy citizens are indeed the greatest asset we can have. Politicians tend to obsess over GDP, productivity, private sector investment, and so on. These are, of course, important. But we can be guilty of missing a bigger prize, the health of our citizens. And it's this I want to speak to you about today, namely the air we breathe. Because, as we've just heard, London air is a matter of life and death. And it's damaging the health of Londoners right across our city. I know from personal experience. At 43, and having only just run the London Marathon, I was diagnosed with adult onset asthma. I was in disbelief at the time. My GP explained to me that this is becoming more common, and largely due to environmental factors like poor air quality. London, the city in which I'd been raised, the city that I love and now proudly lead, had made me ill. Thankfully, my condition is under control. But when I have an attack, it's like I'm being forced to breathe through a crushed straw, my lungs craving for air. Fellow sufferers know the feeling. It can be terrifying. What I go through is nothing compared to what Ella, Adu, Kissy, Deborah went through. I'm pleased and proud with Ella's mum, brother, and sister with us. Rosamond, Robert, and Sophia, you're an inspiration to us all. As you've heard, Ella was a bright, talented girl who dreamed of becoming a pilot. Just before her 7th birthday, Ella developed a cough. Her health declined rapidly, and she was eventually diagnosed with a very severe form of asthma. More than 30 emergency admissions to hospital followed. On Valentine's Day, 2013, Ella was sat with her mum, reading. A few hours later, she stopped breathing. Ella had a seizure in the ambulance and passed away in hospital, aged just 9. The pathologist who conducted the post-mortem concluded that Ella had suffered from one of the worst cases of asthma ever recorded in the UK. Following her tragic death, painstaking effort was made to find out how this wonderful girl's life was cut so cruelly short. It emerged that there was a correlation between spikes in air pollution near the family home and Ella's admission to hospital. Indeed, on the night Ella passed away, her community was engulfed in a toxic fog. 8 long years after Ella's death and following a mammoth campaign led by Rosamond, a coroner concluded that toxic air had contributed to the asthma attack that had claimed her life. It was a landmark moment. Ella became, as you've heard, the first person in the UK to ever have air pollution listed as a cause of death. Ella's loss remains utterly devastating. But you know what? It's by no means isolated. Around 4,000 Londoners, like Ella, die prematurely every year because of toxic air. And it's damaging the health of every single one of us. As you've heard, tiny toxic particles are penetrating our lungs as we walk down the street and go about our lives, entering our bloodstream. And remember, drivers aren't immune. In fact, they're some of the worst affected. The air we breathe is increasing the risk of heart and respiratory diseases, cancer and dementia. But air pollution has a particularly disastrous effect on children. Children are growing up in our city with stunted lungs. More than 3,600 London children were admitted to hospital with asthma in 2021-2022. And pollution particles have even been found in the livers and brains of unborn babies. From the womb to childhood, through adulthood and retirement, toxic air is destroying the health of people across our city at every stage of their life. And we know that it's minority communities and the poorest Londoners who are least likely to own a car and contribute to the pollution who are being hit the hardest. This isn't scaremongering, it's science. It's what the hospitals are reporting. Now, some politicians seem to be willing to watch our streets clog up with pollution, clog up with polluting vehicles, and envelop with poison and do nothing. But that's not why I came into public life. We can't pretend this isn't happening. Given we're in a school, I thought it might be appropriate to deliver a short history lesson. I can see people looking for the exits. I promise it'll be short. Cleaning London's toxic air is nothing new. In fact, King Edward I banned the burning of coal back in the 14th century because it was causing air pollution. Many more efforts to clean up London's air followed until the situation came to a head when a dense, poisonous fog blanketed our city in December of 1952. A catastrophic health emergency that became known as the Great Smog. Visibility was so bad that paramedics had to walk in front of ambulances to reach the sick. Children couldn't attend school. Buses were confined to depots. Thousands of Londoners perished in the immediate aftermath. The government of the day responded with the Clean Air Act, restricting the burning of fuels in urban areas with the introduction of smokeless zones. Not everyone was happy at the time. Habits had to change. Sound familiar? But the legislation led to a dramatic decline in smoke and sulfur dioxide and hugely improved London's air. Lives were saved and London was healthier. The politicians of the day stood up to the opposition and stood up to the vested interests and made the politically tough but right choice. Now, When I first became mayor in 2016, I learned that the former mayor had commissioned, then subsequently buried, a report into London's air quality 3 years earlier. The research was damning. It revealed that hundreds of our primary schools were in areas where pollution breached legal limits, and that the poorest were paying the heaviest price. There was no way I was willing to maintain that culture of indifference. Our response came in the form of our world-leading ultra-low emission zone, introduced in central London and then expanded to cover inner London last year. It requires vehicles driving on our streets to meet the toughest emission standards enforced by any major city in the world. Its impact has been nothing short of transformative. 4 million Londoners are right at this moment breathing cleaner air. Toxic nitrogen dioxide levels have been cut by nearly a half in central London. On average, there are now 44,000 fewer polluting vehicles in central London and 67,000 fewer polluting vehicles in inner London each day. And if we keep going, we'll increase the average life expectancy of a child born in 2013 by around 6 months. And the benefits extend well beyond the health. It's helping us tackle the climate emergency and reach our ambitious 2030 net zero target. In fact, ULEZ has reduced CO2 emissions by 12,300 tonnes in central London. Following the failure of COP to keep 1.5 alive, London is once again leading the way. And ULEZ is also helping us tackle congestion, the cost of which in London last year was estimated at £5 billion, with the average driver spending nearly a week sat in traffic every year. The ULEZ works. It works better than we could ever have hoped. But the job is far from finished. Surely every Londoner across our city has the right to breathe clean air. And we can't rest until that's the case. Earlier this month, the Director of Public Health in the World Health Organization, the WHO, challenged city mayors by asking this question: how many air pollution deaths were we willing to shoulder responsibility for? My answer is none. I don't want anyone else to receive an asthma diagnosis because of air pollution. I don't want anyone else to have to say goodbye to their daughter or sister because of air pollution. I don't want anyone else in London to lose their life or have their health destroyed because of air pollution. We have a long way to go to achieve that. But today, I'm proud to announce there will soon be another step closer, because our ultra-low emission zone will be expanded London-wide in August next year. We know the boroughs with the highest numbers of deaths attributable to air pollution are all in outer London. Havering, with 178 deaths in 1 year. Croydon, 196 deaths. Barnet, 201 deaths. Bromley, 204 deaths attributable to air pollution in 1 year alone. And I could go on. So it's now time that all our communities are afforded the same health benefits as those in inner London. ULEZ expansion will mean 5 million more Londoners will breathe cleaner air. All net revenue generated from the expansion will be spent improving our transport network, including the biggest ever expansion of bus routes in outer London. Many residents in Wood Green and Wanstead, Sutton and Southall, Harrow Hill and Harrow will also see improved bus services in their communities. We'll be consulting communities in outer London as to where the 1 million kilometres of extra bus routes should go. Improving public transport in outer London is central to our transport strategy. Already, more than 96% of Londoners now live within 400 metres of our bus network. We've expanded our overground network, including A new station at Barking Riverside and the Elizabeth line is transforming connectivity, but we're going to go further. And all told, our strategy to clean our air will save our overworked and underfunded NHS and social care system an estimated £5 billion, demonstrating in the clearest terms why the cost of inaction far outweighs the cost of action. Now, I want to address the question that some Londoners might be asking. Why now? Why not in a few years' time? There's no doubt that these are some of the toughest times our capital has faced, with millions of Londoners heading into winter worrying about how they're going to heat their homes and put food on the table. At City Hall, we remain committed to doing everything we can to help people through the cost of living emergency. And it's why I've been relentlessly lobbying the national government for further support while doing all we can to support businesses and families with additional support from City Hall. And let me be frank, this decision to expand the ULEZ has not been made lightly. The easy thing for me would have been to kick the can down the road. But in the end, public health comes before political expediency. When I announced my intention to consult on a ULEZ expansion earlier this year, I said doing so would only be justified under current economic conditions because it will save lives and prevent illnesses. But I also promised it would be done in a balanced way, in a way that leaves no community behind. That's why I can also announce today that we'll extend existing exemption periods for London's disabled drivers and community minibuses run by not-for-profit organisations to October 2027 and October 2025, respectively. We'll introduce new grace periods for all wheelchair-accessible vehicles and those in receipt of a wide range of disability benefits and ensure those that are blue badge holders can access these too. And I'm proud to say we'll establish a new and improved scrappage scheme, the biggest ever seen, almost double the size of the previous scheme and worth £110 million. This unprecedented scheme is there to support disabled Londoners, those on low incomes, small businesses and charities. It will include a new £5,000 scrappage grant for wheelchair accessible vehicles and a new £5,000 retrofit grant for charities and small businesses. We will do this and more because, as promised, we will ensure the burden does not fall on those least able to carry it. And by the way, we're doing it all without a penny of support from the government. Now, there are some politicians in London who are arguing against the expansion of ULEZ, saying there are better ways to tackle air pollution. It was the same story when it came to banning power stations in central London. The same when it came to banning smoking in public spaces. The same when it came to the ULEZ in central London. The same when it came to the expansion last year. We were told the problem wasn't that bad, that the financial cost would outweigh the health benefits and that people didn't want change. Wrong on all counts then, the same now. It's just another excuse for inaction. ULEZ is the fastest way to cut pollution. It's the fastest way to cut air pollution, and we're already doing so much more. We've delivered a 5-fold increase in cycle lanes and introduced more zero-emission buses into our fleet than any city in Western Europe. London now has more than 11,000 public electric vehicle charging points, 1/3 of the UK's total, and more rapid charging points than any city in Western Europe. And we're cleaning up our taxi fleet. We now have fewer diesel taxis and more zero-emission ones. The truth is that those politicians in London who oppose the ULEZ expansion have opposed every single measure we've taken to tackle air pollution and the climate emergency. They might not be air pollution and climate change deniers, but they're classic delayers, and we simply don't have a moment to waste. Let me finish by saying this. Like Sir Winston Churchill, I also believe that healthy citizens are the greatest asset we have. For me, that relationship cuts both ways, meaning government at every level has a duty to protect and better the health of all its people. In a few days, we'll mark the 70th anniversary of the Great Smog, and London is once again in the midst of a health emergency, and once again, we must respond. The difference is that we could see what was killing our communities then, and we can't now. It's invisible. It's not a great smog. Our ultra-low emission zone is this generation's Clean Air Act. And like its predecessor, we're improving and building on it to save and protect Londoners. Death and illness caused by coal pollution is a thing of the past in our city. It's time for us to step forward and do the same for car pollution. So let's clear the air. I want all Londoners to join me in this endeavour so we can look back with pride and say we put the health of our city before all else. That we took seriously our responsibility to our children, our neighbours, our grandparents, our friends and fellow citizens. And that when asked, we did our bit to secure London's legacy for future generations to come, helping to build a better London for everyone, a fairer, greener, safer, and more prosperous city for all. Thank you all very much.
Good morning, esteemed students and guests. I have the unenviable position of standing up here and following Sadiq, along with our wonderful students who have spoken so eloquently today. Thank you very much. So my name is Jonathan Ronan and I am the principal here at Bonus Pastor Catholic College. It gives me great pleasure to welcome the Mayor of London and his guests to our wonderful school to discuss the important topics of air pollution, climate change and saving our planet. At Bonus Pastor, we have three core values: respect, responsibility, and ambition. By adhering to our value of responsibility, our students have taken on the challenge of saving our planet, and through student voice have implemented positive change in our little corner of the world. For example, voluntary litter picks in the local community, introducing recycling bins in all areas of the school, introducing climate-friendly drink machines to reduce plastic waste, and encouraging all of our visitors to respect our environment. On a larger scale, our school has committed to reducing paper production by introducing electronic devices for all. We are converting all light bulbs to LED to reduce energy, and we are part of the school's climate network. We're doing our bit, but we know it's not enough. Through ambitious research, our students have identified the high volume of traffic as a particular concern in this local area. As well as the impact on air pollution, our local roads can cause a safety concern, as you've heard earlier on. Through our science and PE curriculum, our children know that they breathe more air per unit of body size because they have a higher breathing rate and are more physically active. Children spend over 8 hours a day at school and therefore face greater exposure to pollutants. Children have a wonderful way of demystifying political arguments and identifying what is right and wrong. The current young mayor of Lewisham, Rosanna Campbell, and previous young mayor, Femi Komolafe, are both former students of Bonus Pastor Catholic College, and we're very proud of them. They were here last night to celebrate our annual prize-giving event. We asked the central government to match the ambition of the students and continue to put the voice of children at the centre of their decision-making, as we've heard here today. Funding for education must become one of the highest priorities. We know that where you live depends on the air that you breathe, and that is further impacted on by deprivation. Therefore, we welcome the move to reduce pollution in our local area, as we can only see the benefits to our young people. At Bonus Pastor Catholic College, we have strong links with the Ella Foundation. Ella Adu Kissy Deborah died in February 2013. Ella suffered, as you've heard today, from acute asthma and was exposed to pollution way in excess of the World Health Organization guidelines, the principal source of which were traffic emissions. Ella's family, as you've heard today, have campaigned for many years for cleaner air, and we are proud, very proud, that Ella's sister, Sophia, and brother, Robert, are students here at Bonus Pastor. Not only are they fantastic campaigners, but they are also committed, hardworking, talented students, and we are delighted that Robert has agreed to play piano for you today. So without further ado, I introduce Robert Kissy Deborah, who is playing Vivace by Telemann. Thank you. I'm sure you're glad he didn't play first. So fantastic, fantastic performance. That concludes our event here today. We are going to turn this back into a library. Thank you very much for coming and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.